Welcome, welcome to Visual Radio. It's our 29th year. Can you believe it? 29 years. And we've got Mach Bell, the amazing Mach Bell on the air. Hello, Mach.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
It's going great. It was great to see you at Gary Summers' event. Our friend Gary Summers has these Northeast Comic-Cons, and Mark's a regular there, and you have all your books out, and it's a different world from 1976, isn't it?
Yeah, and different from 1968 and 74 and all the good Boston rock years. There's been so many.
They have, and nightclubs, and I remember guest starring with Thunder Train at the club in Cambridge, doing Hot for Teacher with you. So Mark wrote a song called Hot for Teacher, and then Van Halen came out with Hot for Teacher. I think they stole it.
Well, everybody knows they did, but yeah, it was actually Steven Silver that wrote it in 76, yeah, and we recorded it in the spring of 76. This California band, Van Halen, did their own Hot for Teacher many, many years later in 1984. But the famous Hot for Teacher is Thunder Train.
Where did you record that?
That was at the Northern Studios in Maynard, which was the first multi-track, 16-track. There were 8-track studios around Boston, but I think Great Northern was the first 16 to open.
Yeah, that was an awesome place. I was there once. Did you cut the whole album there?
Yeah, Ready Teddy had cut their record there previous to us. You know, Thunder Train got together in 74, and around 75 we started to see something called DIY singles starting to happen. People like Count Viglione and the Willie Alexander's Mass Ave, Box Pass, Ready Teddy releasing their own singles, bypassing the record industry and going straight to the kids. So we released our own single on our own label in 75, and it got the notice of a local record company called Jelly Records right in Lexington, Massachusetts. And they were the ones who recorded the Thunder Train Teenage Suicide album in we actually recorded it in 76, and it came out early in 77.
That was amazing. So that was my question too. The Hot for Teacher was the demo that got the deal for the Jelly Records.
That's right. The single spun into the album. And that's kind of like the old days.
Yeah.
And we did the single and the album with Jelly, and at the same time we struck a deal with Jim Harold, who owned the Rat and who started his own record company called Rat Records, so he could release his Live at the Rat double LP, which came out around the same time as Teenage Suicide, our album. The Live at the Rat came out, and we were also featured on that album.
So, you know, I'll digress for 1 second. I got your single and I got Willie's single, and I went and saw Willie in 75 with Mickey Clean and the Mez and the band Television, like 3 doors down from the Paradise at a weird BU hall. Very loud and crazy, but it was a wonderful concert. And I asked Willie, how do I press my record? And he told me down in Arizona. And so, you know, it was your record and Willie that inspired me to start Varulven. And here we are. But it was it was just a magical time. And I don't think we really knew how great a time it was until we looked back and said, wow, all this stuff happening. The club in Cambridge, the Rat. So
I know. I was too busy trying to scrape $2 together to get a beer and hoping my T-shirt wouldn't fall apart before the next gig to know what good times it was. But yeah, it was great times.
And we made friendships that lasted half a century. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, I guess that's how it is, you know. If we'd all played on a football team together or had all been in the same foxholes at war, I guess we might have put together those kind of brotherhoods and sisterhoods back in the day. But we were rock and roll warriors, and so that's our glory days.
And we're still playing with Gary Summers and David Bieber. You've been to David's archives.
Yes.
What Thunder Train is in there?
It's got a bunch of things. One thing that I liked was he had the Thunder Train album that was from the BCM record library, and it's got the different DJs' names and check marks and dates of when they were playing different cuts. But there were also warnings on the record: do not play this album before 5 p.m. in the afternoon. It can cause tremors to happen in the listenership or whatever. We were a late night album, I guess.
So this is Darren Costa. He was a city councilor here in Everett, and he's our co-host. And here's a funny story about Darren. He was cleaning out a house in Arlington. It was Joe Pope's house, and there were the Beatles magazines downstairs in the cellar. Is that incredible? He knows nothing of our scene. But
I have 2 copies of, I think it was called Strawberry Fields.
Strawberry Fields. Remember that magazine?
Yes.
It was about 25 years ago. I was doing a project, or I was doing something for them, clearing out their garage, and I was able to take home a couple copies.
And the great Joe Pope, another legend. But we're still here. When did you start writing the books?
Well, the books, just listening to Darren tell that story reminds me of, this was such a incredible landing ground for all these bands from the Beatles on. And I started my rock going to concerts with Jimi Hendrix when Jimmy came to Framingham, Mass. I went to see Led Zeppelin in Framingham. This is in the 60s. Bands like Steppenwolf, Jeff Beck Group. I was going to these little clubs like the Boston Tea Party, paying $3 and being right up front and seeing, Keith Emerson, Jeff Beck, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, all these people. And I kept notes about all this. I journaled. And I journaled when my own band started to intersect with the British bands, because I was in Holliston. I'd go to Jimmy not only to be entertained, but also to gauge my progress versus his. And I could see I still had further to go to be as good as Jimmy. But in my books, I saw it that way. In my journals, and I kept journals. And after Thunder Train that I was talking about, I had the opportunity to join the Joe Perry Project, and I kept journals all through touring the country and other countries with Joe. That was the basis of my first book, Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker, is the journals I kept during the 2.5 years that I was singing lead for Joe Perry. The I Got a Rock book that I came out with next goes back to those journals, the Jimi Hendrix journals, the Jeff Beck journals, and my intersection and the Boston rock community's intersection with what was coming from England, from the Beatles on, with the great bands, like I mentioned, Ready Teddy, Willie Alexander, and before them, the Sidewinders and the Lost, and Beacon Street Union and Burying the Remains, and we can go on and on from there. My books talk about the intersection of my career with these other people. Luckily, I got to play with a lot of them and work with a lot of them over the years.
Now, did you ever see Maltin and the Barbarians and the G Clefs?
I did not. Of the early Boston bands, I saw the Sidewinders, Ultimate Spinach, Beacon Street Union. Those are the first 3 that come to mind. I saw Burying the Remains, but years later in a reunion show. I'm talking about actually seeing them in the 60s at a record hall.
Did you ever watch the Beatles at the Suffolk Downs?
I thought the Beatles was a girl thing. I was, only 11, and I didn't quite get it until I was 13. Wasn't until they invented the fuzz tone and I heard Heart Full of Soul that I said, oh, no, this is a guy thing, too. Jeff Beck, immortal. I was slow. I didn't have an older brother or sister, Joe. If I'd had an older brother or sister that was into Eddie Cochran and Elvis, I might have got into it a little earlier. But I had to sift through the haze all by myself. I had a little sister, and she and her friends were all jumping up and down to the Beatles.
Interesting. So, was Stephen Leeds the guy that signed the Joe Perry project?
That's the original project. Before I joined as lead singer, had done 2 Joe Perry project albums, and the first one was Lieber and Krebs were still managing Joe. They had managed Aerosmith through the successful 70s. They were still managing Joe. They put him on their record label, Columbia, same as Aerosmith. They gave him Jack Douglas, the producer, same as Aerosmith. So it was a very smooth transition from Aerosmith to the Joe Perry project. Some of that fell apart for the second album, although it was still on Columbia. But then it all fell apart. Columbia was done with Joe. Columbia wanted Aerosmith. They wanted Joe to get back with Aerosmith, and financing this Joe Perry project was not helping make Aerosmith get back together, so they pulled out. So we really had to start from scratch to get a deal for the new Joe Perry project that I was with. A whole new label, new manager, new everything. And it was Tim Collins, Joe, as you remember, who found the deal for my Joe Perry project in '83 with MCA Universal.
And there wasn't. I remember you coming to my house and playing When Worlds Collide. Was that the demo, or were there demos first?
Yes, we went through. It was not as easy as I thought, or as you might think. You know, hey, Joe Perry needs a record deal. I figured people would be lining up. Nobody was lining up, and we had to do 2 different demo sessions a year apart. The first demo sessions we did with Brad Whitford in our lineup. Brad, also from Aerosmith, who had recently also left Aerosmith, as Joe had. We're talking between 1979 and 1984. These were the years that Joe and Brad were out of Aerosmith. Yeah, we did 2 different demos, and we knocked on many doors, and we toured constantly to try to prove that we were serious and could play without our leader falling off the stage and canceling the tour. It was it was a task.
I remember there was Darren. I went to see Aerosmith, and there were two different guys, Richie Dufay and Crespo. Crespo and Dufay had replaced Whitford and Perry, and I thought it was a good show. Lightning Strikes. I thought it was a pretty good album.
Very good album. Yeah, I mean, Steven Tyler can put stuff together, and he still had, Joey and Tom, the best rhythm section in hard rock. So, they were doing fine. It was a tough road for the Joe Perry project, but we got the deal and produced the album right here in New England. We cut it at Blue Jay Recording Studio in Carlisle.
Which is buried under it's a house buried under sand. They just buried into the side of the road, right? Great place.
That's right. We got to the studio, and I said, "Where's the studio?" There's nothing there. It's an empty lot with a little bulkhead in the doorway. You go in there, and it's like going into a fallout shelter.
It's great. And did you know? I don't know if when you recorded there, but they had the echo chamber from The Boxer, Bridge Over Troubled Water. So that echo chamber they had from New York, it was amazing.
Amazing.
And get to play with that stuff. So that was the recording side. And then the books came out now. I remember you told the story of when Aerosmith joined the Joe Perry project, and you were on stage, and suddenly Tyler shows up. What was that gig?
Yeah. Stephen had shown up not that often, but he had been to a couple. He came to see us at the Bottom Line in New York and enjoyed the show. He was with He was with Crespo, his guitarist from Aerosmith. His oh no, he was with Rick Dufay. I'm sorry. And he also had the drummer Bobby Chenard with him from Billy
Bill,
Squier,
yeah,
and Duke and the Drivers before
and
that.
Alice
Anyway,
Cooper.
and Alice Cooper. Yeah, Stephen came and was like, "Whoa, Joe's really got it together. He's got a new band. He's got a new manager. He's got a new label. He's staying on the stage. He's written a mess of songs." So it was soon after that talk about getting back together. And the funny thing was, Aerosmith wanted to join into what we had put together with the project. They were interested in Joe's crew. They were interested in Joe's management. They were, I mean, and today, finally, they even are now distributed by MCA Universal. They're even on our label. So that took years to happen. But yeah, so we, even after Aerosmith said that they were getting back together, the Joe Perry project continued to work because we had a lot of bookings, and one of them was the Frolics in Salisbury Beach. What a great ballroom. It was fantastic. We were having a great show, full house, and then first out comes Brad Whitford onto stage, joins us, and we were used to that. Oh, and I should say, for those last 3 dates, we had Joey Kramer on drums. So our quartet, it was Danny Hargrove, who recently passed away last week, our bass player.
I know, and he was such a great guy.
The great Danny, the great Joe Perry, Joey Kramer knocking it out on the drums. And I was singing, and then out comes Brad, and he joins us on guitar, and then out dances Steven Tyler. And Steven dances up to me and says, "Hey, do you know any Aerosmith songs?" And I said, "Well, we know Bright Light Fright." And Stephen looked at me and said, "Is that an Aerosmith song?" It actually is. It's an Aerosmith song that Joe wrote that I think it's on what? Is it on Draw the Line or on the bootleg? I don't know. It's on one of the Aerosmith albums, but Stephen didn't write it, so he didn't. But he sang it, and then they did a few more Aerosmith songs, and we all jammed, and it was a great night.
I saw them at the Frolics with the Sidewinders.
Wow.
And I taped the show, so it was a great show. Dream On was just hitting in Boston. So Dream On was #1 in Boston, but not nationally yet. And the Frolics is gone, you know.
Oh, yeah. I know. All these things we're talking about. Blue Jay Recording is gone. The
Is it?
Frolics is gone.
Oh,
Tea
wow.
Party, the Rat.
It all changes. You didn't live at this time. It was fun.
Yeah, it was
We
fun.
had a lot of fun. I mean, you know, you go see the Joe Perry project and Aerosmith shows up, you get 2 shows for the price of 1. You get Mach Belly and Steve Tyler on stage. Boy, was that ever... Anyone have a tape of that?
I'm still getting stuff today. That's part of the joy of writing these books, and the joy of today is we have internet now, so there's connectivity. So I'm getting photographs, tapes, videos. Every year, new things come in, or every day, new things have come into me. So I haven't specifically seen a tape of that show. You know, videotapes, you don't see that much. I was very fortunate that there's a really good videotape of Thunder Train playing at the Rat that exists. It's one of the best Rat live tapes I've ever seen. I should say, Joe, because I'm going to have to leave, that I'm still rocking with the Mock Bell Experience, my band, and oncearocker.com. Oncearocker.com is my website. Everything about my new book, Rock Survival, my other books. I'm about to go out with my band for the summer and do tour dates, mostly here in New England.
Who's in the band before you leave? Who is in the band?
It's a 5-piece band. My lead guitarist, Johnny Press, played with Gross National Productions. He's my age. Gross National Productions is from back in the days of the Unicorn and the Boston Tea Party. They signed a major deal, but they were really far out, like Bugs or Mothers of Invention or Captain Beefheart type of thing. So Nobody knew what to do with him. But I know what to do with Johnny Press. He's an incredible, powerful guitarist who can nail all those Thunder Train and Joe Perry parts. So I'm doing all my old songs in this band. Plus, we're writing new stuff. I got Johnny, Jeff Tremblay on second guitar, Al D'Alessandro, killer drummer, who's also a Fists of Fury. He runs the Academy of Martial Arts out in Worcester. And my bass player, Jim Becker. That's the Mach Bell Experience. MBE, we call it.
Wow, we got to see you at some point.
Experience.
Yeah. OnceARocker.com, you can see the dates. I'm not going to say date because I don't know when this thing will run, but
yeah, hey, we're going to have you in the studio when you're in the Boston area. We got to keep in touch. This is a great interview, Mach, and I'm sorry we only got a half hour, but Darren and I are going to have fun on the air, and you get to your meeting. Thank you so much for your patience today.
Thank you for your time.
Well, Joe, it was great to talk to you again. Darren, it was nice to meet you. Guys, rock on. Keep it rolling. Love Everett.
Rock on.
All right. Mach Bell, the legend.
The rocker, the lifetime rocker.
So, do you want to see what I got in the mail?
Sure.
Okay, this is fun. Aki's going to like this. We're still rolling, right? Okay, so I want to do a presentation here. This is a book that Derek Taylor actually ghost wrote, because I'm reading the I Me Mine book on George Harrison. Well, I've actually finished it because it's all pictures and stuff. And as I'm reading this, Derek Taylor says, well, I ghost wrote Cellar Full of Noise. And that's what I got myself from Amazon. Cellar Full of Noise is a line in the song, I Know a Place by Petula Clark. I always thought she was singing a South of Illinois. It's not South of Illinois, it's Cellar Full of Noise. And that's called a Lady Mondegreen. You ever heard that term?
I've never heard that term.
Lady Mondegreen is if you're hearing Crimson and Clover and you think he's singing Christmas is Over. Misheard lyrics. There are so many, Jimi Hendrix.
Big in my house.
Now, the great Jimmy Miller, Rolling Stones producer, and JoJo Lane, my ex-girlfriend, they're both gone now. So anyway, they come into my house, and I had this great CD player, and I could isolate things, just play it over and over again. So I had Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, just saying, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky," over and over again, right? But if you think about it, it sounds like, well, I kissed this guy. And they got right away what I was, Jimmy, and Jimmy goes, only Joe Vig would do that, right? And a book came out, "Excuse Me While I Kissed This Guy," about the misheard lyric in Purple Haze.
Now, did you have the lyrics like on the album cover? Or
No. I just,
didn't come with it.
We were just, rock and roll fans. We just,
My
study.
wife misses having the lyrics. She misses having the little slip that used to come in the CD way back when.
Right, but no, this is if you hear a song and you don't know what they're singing. Louie Louie. Well, Louie Louie is the most famous one. See, you're a bit young, but did you know the FBI investigated Louie Louie?
I did not.
Oh, so Louie Louie was a song by Richard Berry. It was a reggae song.
I know the song.
Yeah, and the Wailers up in Seattle, not Bob Marley and the Wailers, the different Wailers had a hit with it in Oregon, of all places, like Washington State and up in the Northwest. So Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Kingsmen were local bands up in the area. But Paul Revere and the Raiders were on Columbia Records, and Kingsmen were not. They both went into the studio, the same week, same studio, and cut the song. Louie Louie. Well, Boston, of all places, picked up on the Kingsmen version, and Seattle picked up on it. So you got two cities, and Boston made it the worst record of the week. And Arnie Woo Woo Ginsburg and WMEX, and people kept calling in, yeah, we want to hear the worst record of the week. And the thing took off, and the Kingsmen had to come to Boston. But Jordan Records, Jerry Denner, the record promotion guy, put it out, and then Scepter One picked it up, which was Dionne Warwick's label. They were a black record label, and they thought they had a black artist. And then these 5 white kids walk in to get the gold record, and Scepter realized, wow, we have a white band. It was pretty funny. And Louie Louie took off. Now, Jack Eli was singing in the room with the mic coming down, so people couldn't hear him. And it sounds like all these vulgar words in the song. Every night at 10, I her again. And it's like the FBI investigated the song. It was a wild ride. And there's 2 books out on the song already.
So it was the lyrics of the song?
People thought they were hearing, instead of 3 nights and days I sail the sea, I think of the girl constantly. That's the original lyric. At the Kingsman, it sounds like every night at 10, her again. All the girls, all kinds of ways. Instead of 3 nights and days I sail the sea, I think of the girl, not all the girls.
Okay,
I think of the girl constantly. It's great.
Well, now foul language is
Well, yeah,
well
but at the time,
accepted.
we're talking 63.
right, and now you hear things that,
Well, here's the funny thing. It cost $50 to record. They only recorded it for a booze cruise. They needed a demo tape for a booze cruise. And Jerry Denner picked it up, and the rest is history. But the same week, they were kept from number 1. They were at number 2. The number 1 song also cost $50. It was Dominique, the singing nun, doing the singing nun singing Dominique, Nika, Nika.
Oh, okay, yep. I've heard
And that
before.
cost $50. And 2 songs that cost $50 are at 1 and 2 in Billboard. It was hilarious. I was 9 years old. I didn't know. But this is some rock history.
Wow, $50 that long ago. That seems like more than.
Well, nowadays you go in. I go in a studio.
Nowadays you you just need a phone.
Yeah, but I go in a studio and I got a good deal with my engineer. But you can pay $80 an hour. You can come out of there with a $1,000 bill.
I'm sure.
When $50 in them might have been $500 back then. Who knows? Or maybe $1,000. But it was $50 in 1963, and so we got onto that from south of Illinois, or a cellar full of noise. Now Brian Epstein was the Beatles manager,
Okay.
and it says on the cover, Brian Epstein, but it was actually Derek Taylor who wrote the book.
Oh.
So Derek Taylor is a guy that was at one of the magazines in England, and he had interviewed the Beatles. So the newspaper came up with an idea, why doesn't George Harrison write a column for us? And that's all in this book too, because Derek Taylor co-wrote this book. It's credited to George, but in the book you know what Derek wrote, because they have him in italics and George in bold print. So Derek Taylor co-wrote this with Harrison, but he actually wrote the Beatles manager book. And Derek said they came to George Harrison and asked if he'd write a column. And the manager, Brian Epstein, said, well, we're not doing it for $50. You got to pay us 100 quid or whatever it was, 100 pounds. So they agreed, and Derek wrote the articles, and George would read them and then make corrections and whatever. And so they had a George Harrison column in the newspaper. Then they became friends, and Epstein hired Derek Taylor, and he became the Beatles publicist and whatever. But interesting how that goes.
It is, yeah. It's interesting. Well, it's not easy to write a book, so I can understand why you draft someone who can help you, help you put your thoughts into practice, right? Because if you're writing something about yourself, and or about your experience, that's not simple.
Well, this is one of my guests, Bill Genovitz, and he's from the band called Buffalo Tom. But Bill wrote this book on the Stones, and he put a nice blurb about me because I was managing their producer. And he called me up and asked me for information on Jimmy Miller, and he wrote this Rocks Off. Happy Together, now this is Mark Volman's book. Mark Volman was in the Turtles, and the great thing about this is it's written by all the people he knew, and they all give quotes. And there's a lot of people I know in the book. Mark Parento from WBCN, and it's interesting. I'm flipping through the book, and it's like, oh, I know him, and oh, wow, he's a friend of mine, and Greg Hawkes of the Cars. And so it's interesting how that book is all quotes from other people, and it tells the turtle story. There's about 3 books out on the turtles. I think that's Mark Volman. So Howard Kalin, I think, worked with Jeff Tamarkin to write a book. Now, Tamarkin was my editor, great guy. When I wrote for, I co-wrote articles for Discoveries and Record Collect, no, Discoveries and Goldmine. And so the world of writing is an interesting place. But different ways to write books. Derek Taylor writing that as a ghostwriter, other people writing that, Derek and George Harrison writing this, and Bill Janovitz doing his top 50 songs on the Rolling Stones. Have you ever thought of a book? Everett Politics.
I don't think. See, I was just thinking about that. I can write bite-sized articles, 5-minute reads, but I'm not sure I can I don't think I can get through it. So maybe I need someone who can help me.
Or you get the newspaper writers, and you have columns from them, and you kind of supervise it and give your thoughts on these columns and republish the columns in a book, the pertinent ones that would reach a national audience.
Republish my thoughts on the book, or
what you take is like the guy at the Everett Leader. You know him, right?
To say I know all of the editors in the city,
right?
I know the ones that bill me probably a little bit better than the ones that put the ads together from all 3.
Well, let's say you find an article about Everett that's historical.
There's a lot of them, yeah. And
important to the nation. So you take that article, you get the rights to it, and then you kind of put your thoughts to that article, and the book will write itself. Because you don't have to write a full book.
That's a lot of research. That's a lot of.
So you do it like I'm writing a book on Jimmy Miller, and I have 26 pages he wrote himself. So, but I lived the story with him. I got like Joe Perry
That's
project.
That's the thing. You lived it, right? I didn't. There's a huge history that, it's lived history is a lot different.
Well, I didn't live Jimmy working with the Rolling Stones or working with the Plasmatics, but I know of it. So
right. And you knew of it while it was happening.
Well,
kind of live and in its time.
Not really. I was a fan in '72, and in '83 I became his manager. 11 years later, who would have thought that 11 years later I'd be the Rolling Stones producer's manager, right? And you can only imagine the information I have from, I'm in my cellar playing keyboards, and Jimmy's on the drums, like he was on You Can't Always Get What You Want. We're playing the song. And I got the original drummer in my cellar. Now, some people, so what? But to other people, like, wow, because that'll never happen again. He's gone. And that was kind of like, how many people can say I played You Can't Always Get What You Want with the original drummer? And I had dinner with Charlie Watts. Jimmy brought me to dinner with Charlie Watts of the Stones. And so these are fun stories that I can put into my life in my book. But, we could take.
Are you writing the book?
Oh, yeah. I've got 10 books.
You're a much better writer than I am.
Well, I've got 10 books on my computer.
10?
Yeah, like there's a Lou Reed book and a Jimi Hendrix book and a visual radio book with all these interviews. I got 1,000 interviews. Come on, there's a book there.
That's great content, yeah.
Yeah, tons of content.
A book about yeah.
Who has the time? Because we're busy doing interviews. Who has time to write about what you're doing?
I was talking to the station manager about time. I wish I can dedicate more time to, to different aspects of creating content, but they've made it easy to create content, but it's still not easy because there's content. The content and research that you need to create new content has multiplied dozens of times over in the last 50 years, right? So many more things and events and content is being created every minute than ever.
Well, you get 8 billion people on the planet, and each one
has a phone.
When I started writing, Darren, was 1969. I lived in Arlington where Joe Pope lived, I lived on the lake. And my concept in '69 was, I'm going to just walk up to people and interview them. And then I meet, the Maysler's brothers who did Gimme Shelter for the Stones and the Beatles at Ed Sullivan as a reporter for the school newspaper. And then I meet Alfred Hitchcock. And it's like, wow, I can write about these famous people instead of unknowns. and you know, and God gave me all sorts of connections.
Did you have any bad experiences with anybody locally or more broadly famous in your interviewing, in your early interviewing?
No, no, because we were just having fun. So me and my girlfriend at the time would write, we'd go to the drive-in all the time, we'd write horror movie reviews. And that was our book. So instead of doing the interviews, you start off with a plan. Like Visual Radio was going to be an overnight show from midnight to 6,
Whoa.
where I just have like Mick Taylor of the Rolling Stones walk in, or play my video of him, of my interview with him. But I could run an all-night show, and then I started getting book authors. So it veered off from the original concept to being a show about book authors. And then we, you know, tape rock and roll shows and stuff. I'll tell you a funny thing. As we're interviewing David Bieber 2 nights ago, Sunday night. Today is March 26th. So March 24th with Wakefield TV and Paul Norman, who you met, who's going to be here on Everett TV. Paul Norman was taping us at the Bieber Archives, 10,000 square feet of collectibles like you've never seen. There's no place like this in the world. I mean, it is. I said, David, is there any place like this anywhere else? He goes, I don't know of it. I mean, this is a $1 million place with like 175,000 record albums, matchbooks, things on. His stuff is used in movies. He licenses out. No one can buy his stuff. You can only license it. And so I said, well, I'm writing a book on Rob Fraboni of the Rolling Stones. Do you have any Rolling Stones pictures? I said this on the, oh, I got tons of rare ones. So now I can license for the book through my friend of 50 years, you know, David Bieber. I can now license material for the book. And it's like, wow, one-stop shop. You just can, you know, nowadays you strike the deal, you sign the contract, you get the photos over WeTransfer. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What you can do.
Capabilities, and because it's all around the cost.
So
it became so cheap to store things.
Here's a fun story for you. I guess a week ago was the anniversary of the Gardner Museum heist.
Okay.
There was a guy called the president of rock and roll, Miles Connor. He was an art thief. Now his guitarist was on my record label, Paul Don Santo. And Paul said it was real weird. We'd be at the show waiting for him, and Miles was late, and he had just done a heist of artwork, and he's on stage shaking like a leaf, and he's playing. So Miles performed at the Regent Theater last
In
week.
Arlington.
I didn't even know this, right? They had an anniversary party for the Gardner heist. And they had this art thief, this famous art thief, the president of rock and roll. That was what he called himself. So as Mach Bell's talking about Johnny Presson writing, oh, president of rock and roll, Miles Connor. So I used to be the publicist for record shows. You know, you go and you buy records from all these dealers. It's $5 to get in, and you can go see all the
shop
dealers.
the records, yeah.
I would bring some famous people in. Andy Pratt, Stookie from the Nas, who's dead now. He passed away, but Stookie was great. He worked with Todd Rundgren, and so I brought all these different people in to spice up the shows. And I wanted to bring in Miles Connor, so a friend of mine said, send him a subpoena. So I sent a fake subpoena to come to the record show. He ignored it.
No, okay.
But it's still pretty funny.
Yeah.
The guy was in jail, and he was, you know, prisoned for stealing art. But they focus on Miles because they figure he knows something about the thief who stole the Gardner stuff. So you talk about stories? All right, so let's talk about Darren Costa. We're going to be doing a documentary on seniors.
You're going to be doing one. I'm just gonna do the easy part.
Right. Now, I wouldn't ordinarily keep an Andre Costalance album. Costalanets. I can't even say it. He does Valerie on this. But the album is called For the Young at Heart. Okay? And then there's Percy Faith. I love Percy Faith. Theme from a Summer Place, right? And he does Summertime on this from Porgy and Bess. But the album is Younger Than Springtime. So I'm taking these albums with titles of the youth. And our documentary is on the seniors not being seniors. I mean, I'm 19 years old. Even though I'll be 70 in about a month.
You feel 19 years old.
Yeah, and
That's the goal.
I said to Shelby, boy, I'm one of the busiest guys here. She goes, you're the only guy who works. And I'm the busiest guy at Whittier, let's face
But
it.
the goal is to not work. I've met a lot of people that they literally know their number of days until their retirement, but you want to work.
I'll work till the day I die.
Man,
I mean, I'll be writing, I'll be collecting records.
that's my goal too.
I mean, I'm immersed in this. This is what I do.
The writing comes in ebbs and flows for me, but like I said, it's very challenging for me to think about filling this much content, that's based on a specific subject rather than doses of writing. I've written, it's on my website, a lot of the writing I've done and distributed. I will distribute across all of the 3 newspapers here, or at least I try to. And it's fun. I think that's fun.
When your kids are old enough, maybe you can give them a project to take in your writings and filing them.
Oh gosh, you think they'll want to do that?
Yeah, I think.
How old? At what age do they want to do that?
Well, I really started at 15. And I started writing, I was writing poems and stuff at 12. So like at 12 years old, I would have done it. But that's me. They've got to be into it.
I don't. My son's only 6, but I don't see that. My daughter's too young to even.
Oh,
have
no,
to
but
grasp
like
what I see. But
when they get to be 10 and stuff, and they see what Dad's doing,
he loves art and he loves being outside. Those are the 2 things that playing outside and doing art.
So he can do art for the book.
Maybe he'll make paintings of me.
See, I'm writing a book called The Demo That Got the Deal. Here's a copy of it right here. So I got like 50 pages done. And what this is inside this show, I asked Mark Bell, the demo that got the deal for Joe Perry Project.
Right.
And for Thunder Train. So in here is the Motown contract I did.
Okay.
I signed a Motown deal for a band called the Manish Boys from England. Now this should have been the Buddy Guy Project, but I got outvoted by Jimmy Miller. But in here is a picture of me with Felix Cavalier of the Young Rascals. Oh, and a 2-page letter from Jimmy Miller saying how great my work is for him.
Oh, cool.
His father was the big promoter that did Eddie Fisher and Elvis at Vegas. And the old man, and I met him once, Bill Miller. Bill Miller said, "You got a hell of a publicist." Which was a nice compliment from the guy that booked Elvis in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And, I signed Johnny Thunders of the New York Dolls. So, like, when Joe Perry couldn't get an album deal, like Mach said, Johnny Thunders from the Dolls could not get a record deal.
Wow.
And I got him signed in Europe, and it was our biggest selling record of the year. So, what I do with my books, I write them incrementally.
Huh.
I just found my first French contract when I got signed to the label that I signed Thunders to.
Right.
So now I'm going to add that French contract to this.
How much of approach to the marketing of music was where you went? Because like you mentioned, there's a wave of the Beatles coming to America, right? But it could be if they started in America, they'd never take off, right? So how did you deal with localization of releasing content, or how to do the marketing? Where?
First thing that happened was there was a coalition of people who bumped into each other and found each other, lifelong friends, I found. We were taping shows. So you just have it in you that, like, I got to record this. And I'd go see Gimme Shelter, the movie, and with my girlfriend. She was annoyed, so that didn't last. It lasted maybe, she was the longest girlfriend I had outside of JoJo. And it was like 2 years. We had to be at the drive-in, and her friends would be in the car and saying, "Joe's really cool. Wow, he's taping the show." And she would just like, "Oh, this is," she dismissed me, even though she wrote for the magazine. I would audio tape on cassette the Gimme Shelter movie because I had to have it before the soundtrack came out. I taped The Wizard of Oz off of TV, a pure, direct audio. So we meet David Bowie in 1976. I met David Bowie and Iggy Pop, and we're hanging out with Iggy for 3 days. And the girl I'm not going to mention her name, but she was immortalized in an Aerosmith song, Back in the Saddle Again. We're having breakfast. And Corrine Schwab is sitting across from us. Corrine was David Bowie's manager.
Okay.
And she hears me playing The Wizard of Oz at breakfast, and the girl and I are just like, we're just listening to The Wizard of Oz. And Corrine was fascinated with us because I was playing The Wizard of Oz on cassette. But that's just what you do because we were into it.
Was this after the 3 days or during?
During.
Like you guys were having some fun.
Yeah, there was the concert at night. Then you have to have breakfast. So we're having breakfast. And this is just me. I didn't know Corrine Schwab would be sitting near us, right next to us practically. Mm-hmm. And I just brought the cassette down and played it. We weren't doing it to impress anyone. We were doing it because that's what we do.
I figured it was comforting maybe after a long weekend of having fun.
No, we always had fun. Okay. I mean, Iggy Pop was there. I mean, we got hotel rooms at the Springfield Marriott because these girls were definitely groupies, okay? And I was just the guy who drove, right? So like she goes, there's Iggy, go get him. She throws me in the elevator with Iggy Pop. So there's me and Iggy, and I go, you look like a friend of mine. He goes, yeah? I said, yeah, his name is James. He goes, that's me. I said, James Osterberg, that's me. It was Iggy, right? He was impressed that I was a fan, and I knew who he was.
Name. Yeah, wow.
And he hung out with us for 3 days, and he met the girls I was with. We had the tape recorder going, which is a wiretap violation 50 years ago, so you can't get me. The statute of limitations over. We had the tape recorder going under the bed, and Iggy and I are singing on it, Wasted Days and Wasted Nights together. Freddie Fender tune. Is that great?
Very good. Yeah, awesome.
He introduced us to Bowie. So that was fun. And I said, David, I love your stuff. And he said, thank you, man. And then he came and had drinks with us. So to make things interesting, there were two guys sitting behind us. I decided to hit on the two guys just for fun. They kind of knew it, and Bowie and Iggy loved it. And that was our Springfield trip. So we had drinks with David. Met him a couple of times. But why did I even get to David Bowie? Oh, because of Corrine, and we were taping things. I taped the show, of course. There were a lot of tapings of Bowie. But a book came out on the Bowie tapes, and I had taped his very first show in Boston at the Music Hall. I brought a tape recorder. RCA taped it as well, so they have the original tape. But this book published that, Joe Vig had the recorder out. What a show. David Bowie did like 250 people at the Wang Center. Only like 250 people. RCA funded the tour. They wanted to launch him.
That's empty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were drag queens. They were like drag queens, me, like 250 people. Bowie was brilliant. He was sick that night, but he did Ziggy Stardust. He was brilliant. The band Mushroom opened, never heard of them again.
That was an interesting area where the Wang Theater is there.
Yeah, and then I waved to him from his limo, and he waved back. Oh, that was my first meeting with him. Cool. But I actually met him at the hotel and at the Four Seasons Hotel again and hung out with him. But he went to the gay bar the other side. I had no idea. I read it in the paper. I was like, damn, if I knew.
You'd have been there.
Right. But, he went to this notorious gay bar. And across the street from it was like a drag queen bar called Jacques. Jacques is so dangerous, they make it shut down at midnight. It's only got a midnight license.
It's still open, though.
Yeah.
So it's been open for quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's, I won't get into the details. It's a notorious club with heavy-duty drag queens, and the drag queens are actually very violent. So we used to record next door to Jacques at Electroacoustic Studios. They moved to Maine because they were tired of the drag queens having knife fights outside of the studio.
Okay. Yeah.
Welcome to, that was 50 years ago. Welcome to Boston Scene. But 50 years later, they still can't open after midnight, Jacques. So it's been a stigma on them for a while, and rightfully so. It's kind of really, I wouldn't want to be there.
They've survived quite a few, 50 years is Cambridge Central Square, so much has shut down. There was Staples, I used to go to Central Square a lot. They have the comedy place. I forget what it was called, but there was quite a few iconic bars that closed there too. I used to go to Green Street a lot.
The comedy
That's
clubs
still
were very
open.
big.
Yeah.
Anyways, Jeff Dearman's in the audience, and Jeff Dearman's going to be doing the music closet here. He's one of our new hosts. Do you want to say hi on camera? I'll let you use my mic. You don't have to. He's good. So Jeff's good, but he's in the audience.
He's saying hello in the audience.
Yeah, Chris Donovan was going to show up, but he might have had meetings. So we invite people down here. Akinil does a great job as our director today.
And today we had Mach Bell,
Yep.
author. He had Rock Survival. He showed us Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. We
I didn't know he
showcased
saw
his
Jimi
journals.
Hendrix so much.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow.
He'd seen Jimmy more than once. That's like, wow.
Have you seen his social? I wanted to ask, we didn't have time, but he hosts the 4th annual Cowboy Award Show.
He's the cowboy, Mach Bell.
He's the cowboy. Yeah.
I don't check out people's social media. I know them. I hang out with them, not
Yeah.
their social media.
Yeah, I do. That's
It's,
my direct to market access to an individual and what they're focusing on at that time, right? Now they talked about 8 tracks and then 16 tracks. Now you can, you don't have to leave your home and you can do a lot.
But the Beatles records and the Stones records were made on 4-track and 8-track. And you have to minus 2 tracks because to harness them, you have to use 2 tracks. So you're talking 4 tracks and 6 tracks of music. Those magnificent albums, I mean, this album, Dave Mason Live, was probably done on a 2-track. Dave Mason's coming to the Lynn Auditorium, and I'd love to interview him. Because
Lynn Auditorium, beautiful.
so Dave Mason found a guy named, a guy became a friend of mine. His name was Doug Feiger. Remember Jeffrey Feiger, the famous lawyer that had Dr. Death, Dr. Kevorkian?
No. I remember that case, but I don't remember.
Dr.
the lawyer.
Kevorkian's lawyer was Jeffrey Feiger. And then there's Doug's sister and Doug Feiger. And so Doug Feiger, Dave Mason found him and brought him to Jimmy Miller. Jimmy Miller signed him to RCA Records under the name Sky and produced 2 albums. He came back and wrote a song called My Sharona
Oh, okay. Familiar with
as
that.
the knack.
Familiar
Doug
with
is
that.
gone now. Sadly, he was a great guy, and we were friends. And I wrote his bio for AllMusic.com. So if you go to AllMusic.com, you can see Doug Feiger's bio that I wrote. And his sister wrote me an email and said, "I know you're a film critic, and you went to see, I forget the name of the movie. It was a science fiction movie." He goes, she said, "Is My Sharona in it?" I said, "You'll be happy to hear My Sharona's in it twice." Super something, I forget the name of the movie, but it was a science fiction movie. It was fun to get a letter from Doug's sister saying, "Hey, we're friends on Facebook," and she said, "Did you see the movie yet? They haven't told me if they used the song." I said, "Oh yeah, it's in it twice." And they very rarely use a song twice. Dave wrote a song called Feeling All Right. Dave Mason, he's on Blue Thumb. Which Blue Thumb got purchased by, David Bieber just told us this, a famous guitarist now has Blue Thumb Records. But Mason was in Traffic. He wrote Feeling All Right. And Feeling All Right was in that movie Flight by director Robert Zemeckis, who did Back to the Future, because I interviewed Robert over his movie Flight. He had Feeling All Right and 2 Rolling Stones songs in it. And I said, "Mr. Zemeckis, I'm just going to tell you, as Jimmy Miller's manager, he would have loved the placement, where you placed his songs in the movie. He would have loved it." And I guess Paramount Pictures told the promotion people Joe was the best interview of the day with Robert Zemeckis. So that was, we do good interview, Darren. We do good interviews.
When you walked in, you talked about Mercury. What's going on? What are we missing?
Mercury Records?
No.
Oh, Mercury's retrograde. Don't you
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
that means?
I'm sure. I've been out of listening to what's going on out there.
Mercury retrograde is astrology, but I think it's the law of physics. So it's an illusion that come April, like April 1st or April 3rd, Mercury is going to be parallel with Earth, but it's actually an illusion. It's not actually parallel, but it looks like it is if you look through a telescope. And as Mercury is this big hot ball of metal close to the sun. And you know we're right in the middle of sunstorms? There's massive sunstorms going on.
Okay, I did not.
Sunstorms affect AM radio. So Earth gets affected because, of course, the sun, you know, gives us life, but these sunstorms are like atomic bombs going off on the sun. You know, 100 atomic bombs, 1,000, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but they're like on the top of the sun. Sun is 1,000,000 times the size of Earth.
Yeah.
But just think of these thousands of atomic bombs going off on the sun.
On the sun.
And then it comes out and it hits Earth. So the AM radio gets all weirded out. So there's something physical about it, not just astrological. Mercury retrograde, all sorts of stuff goes haywire. Computers, you know, maybe the computer this morning, we're at the beginning of Mercury retrograde. It's not retrograde yet, but even the beginning and the end.
Starting. Yeah.
Right, there's it's coming towards us, and it screws with communications and electronics and cars and all sorts of stuff. So you just have to be very careful during a 3-4 week period.
Okay.
Because I think it's like the moon pulling the tides. I think Mercury retrograde, that hot ball of metal from the sun, is actually screwing with our electronics, and it's physical, not just astrology. But I might be wrong. It's just a theory of mine. How's that?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Okay.
Aki, are you feeling any Mercury retrograde in your brain today? No?
No, camera's working.
We're having fun. See, we can do this even without our guests. I used to get Variety in the mail, but, you know, I don't have time to read them anymore. I read everything online. You know, Variety, for cheap money, you can get this great book, which, like, you know, Emma Stone and Bradley Cooper and gorgeous pictures. And, you know, I'll just give this to the Bieber Archives, and he salts away thousands of. You got to come out with me to the Bieber Archives.
The Bieber Archive.
It's a museum. And, okay, we're all set? Is that, 5 minutes? We got 5 minutes.
5.
What do you want to say? I've been rambling.
No, I was happy to have Mach Bell here talking about his books. I was hoping we'd get to his social media a lot. I know you guys talked about the Joe Perry Project and Thunder Train. Gary Summers talked a little bit about Mercury and the Sun. It was cool. It was cool to have it would have been nicer to have a longer interview if technical setbacks.
Well, we're going to have people in studio, but the Zoom thing is good because it gets to show some content, and you get to see the faces of our guest stars. And
and the Mach Bell Experience, his new band. I didn't catch if they were playing anywhere, but
he used to have Mag 4. He went from Thunder Train to Mag 4 to Joe Perry Project. There were all sorts of names, and but Thunder Train was a mainstream hard rock band, and we were punks. So they were able to be punks inside our scene. They weren't ostracized the way Charlie Farron and John Butcher were in a whole other scene back then. They were in the hard rock scene and the nightclubs, and we were at the Rat. But nowadays, we're all one. There's none of that, being ostracized for being too pop or being too heavy metal. Everything's all now, Charlie Farron's one of us, and Girls Night Out is one of us, and, you know, we're all the same kind of, we're all musicians. But it was funny how in those days there were these, you had to be underground, and sometimes I wasn't punk enough for them. Someone yelled at me, "You're too mainstream." And it's like, well, I wasn't mainstream as Thunder Train, but they didn't hide it. And I would just like go from genre to genre because that's me. But, you know, there's no denying that, you know, I made my mark and Mach made his mark, and we all were part of the club. And now you're all part of our club.
yeah.
Here on Visual Radio, because we reminisce and bring the content out. That's my story today.
Check out the Mach Bell Experience.
I can't wait to read Cellar Full of Noise, known as Derek Taylor wrote it for Brian Epstein. It's not a hard read. I'm shocked at how thin the book is. It's only 146 pages. That's kind of crazy.
Should be an easy treadmill read.
A cellar full of noise, south of Illinois. Brian Epstein. Brian didn't commit suicide, according to Derek Taylor. It was a drug time. He took drugs and alcohol, and he died that night. But he didn't kill himself. He had too much to live for. He was managing the Beatles. Why would he off himself? It was just he shouldn't have done all that partying. I don't. Do you?
What, party?
We're all straight-laced.
There's kids that keep me busy. We party. We do a lot of dancing. Remember to Taylor Swift. A lot of Taylor Swift in the house. Very popular.
Okay, we're wrapping up today. Thank you, Ockeneel.
Thank you, City of Everett.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff
ECTV.
Darren, and Chris Donovan, and Mach Bell, and
ECTV.
ECTV, David Bieber, and Paul Norman, and everyone, the whole gang. We'll be back. The views and opinions are our own. So there.